This is a story that up to today, no one has been able to solve its mystery, and in turn answer its big question: what happened to the blue-haired woman? Sandra Hughes has not been heard from since disappearing on 26th of June 2020. During the COVID-19 lockdown, a woman went to the Sierra National Forest to reconnect with nature. A couple of days later, she could not be reached, and her whereabouts were unknown. Sandra Johnson Hughes was a 54-year-old woman who lived in Maui, Hawaii. She had been married twice, both marriages ending in divorce, and she had no children of her own. Sandra worked as an accountant, but that was far from what she deemed as her true calling. Deep down she wanted to live as a nomad, and discover all of the United States, and her job as an accountant was her way of financing her nomadic life. Then the pandemic hit. And when the COVID-19 lockdown was issued, and there were speculations that it might be a long time before quarantine and curfew was lifted, she jumped at that chance, and decided that this was the time to live her dream. Since Sandra had done a university course on wilderness survival and passed with flying colors, she had no second thoughts as to whether she would be fine out there all alone. And that's where I believe she made her first mistake, for the first rule of camping should be at least not to go alone. She talked to her family about it, and she was very excited that finally she would get to follow her passion. She would later on sell everything she had in Maui, Hawaii, in preparation of moving to Madera County, California. It was evident that Sandra Hughes was serious about relocating, and nothing was going to stop her from going to live in Sierra National Forest. She chose a particular part of that forest, the Johnson Meadows, and on 26th of June 2020, Sandra drove her silver sedan to the Johnson Meadows. Although the meadows had breathtaking views, it was widely inhabited by cougars and bears, another mistake. Moreover, Johnson Meadows was an isolated part of the Sierra National Forest, so camping there, let alone by yourself, is dangerous. But because of her park ranger skills, she was not in the bit worried, and so was her family. 1 week later, on 2nd of July 2020, some hikers who were on that particular part of the forest, spotted the signs of another campsite, and approached it to have a better view, and probably say hello. But as they approached it, something just did not sit right. The campsite was a mess, the tent had tippled over, and there were unopened cans of food left behind. Additionally, the belongings of the campsite that they were now looking at were scattered everywhere. It had all the markings that someone had been there. But why did they leave it so trashed, and where did they leave to in such a hurry? So what they did is, they marked the area in their maps, so that they would report it later to the park rangers. When the park rangers came to investigate the abandoned campsite, they recovered an ID, and it belonged to Sandra Hughes. So they did what was only right to do. They contacted her family to better understand what they were dealing with, but her family was totally surprised, and added that was unlike Sandra to leave things in such a mess. In fact, a family member said that Sandra was trained in outdoor survival, that she would never leave her campsite in such a mess, and that even a piece of litter on the ground would bother her. So what turned out to be an abandoned campsite reported by some hikers, would turn into something serious. It was now evident that Sandra Hughes was a missing person. The sheriff put up a search party, and they assumed that it would be easier trying to locate this woman, since before going on this trip, she had dyed her hair blue. They put up posters of the blue-haired woman, and asked hikers who were at that part of the forest to report anything unusual, no matter how small it may look. 2 days later, a hiker reported something that to date hasn't been solved. He talked of how when he was out camping with his friends, they saw a barefoot woman, who was wearing a black shirt and blue jeans, who looked like she had had a very rough time. They tried signaling the woman by saying hello, but she didn't respond. She just stood there, as if she was in a trance. They thought the woman wanted to be left alone, so they just minded their business, and went their way. Later on, when they saw a poster of a blue-haired woman who was allegedly missing, they reported the matter right away. Together with the rescue team, They rushed to the place where they had seen her, but she was nowhere to be found. They could not find any traces of her, or anything that might be a hint she had been there, or where she had gone off to. Time passed and another hiker reported that he had seen a car 5 miles from Sandra's campsite. It was discovered that the car did indeed belong to Sandra, and again, her belongings were in the same situation as her campsite when it was discovered, but still, nothing was adding up. A week later, a rescue team found something that shook them at a lake called Spotted Lake. To get to the Spotted Lake was almost impossible since it was full of rocks and there were no roads leading to it. The rescue team found a sleeping bag, and it belonged to Sandra Hughes. Moreover, there were signs that someone had slept in it recently. What was odd was that they couldn't find Sandra, and they had no clues to follow. Sandra's case began slowing down and going cold until a 3-year-old boy was caught talking to an invisible person, and when asked to describe the person, he said it was a woman who had blue hair, and wore a black t-shirt with blue jeans. The child's parents had taken their 3 children to the Sierra National Forest for a family day out. And when the children complained they were hungry, their father drove and packed at the nearby meadows, and unpacked food for his children to have a bite. It was then that Caden, their 3-year-old son, started talking to someone by a tree. The parents, Jake and Victoria Gorba, turned to see who their son was talking to, but there was no one there. So who was Caden having this lengthy conversation with? It was then that Caden turned and pointed to a tree saying, "That woman needs our help." When the parents told him there was no one there, he insisted, trust me, mommy, she needs our help, but she is dead, and she can't talk to you, she's lying with her face down and her legs up. We have to go and help her." And that was how the trip ended, and they had to go back home as the parents were terrified of what had just happened. The mom, Victoria, posted on Facebook saying that they had gone for a family trip, and their son saw a blue-haired woman, wearing a black t-shirt and blue jeans asking for their help, but they could not see her. When the Madera County Sheriff saw the post, he visited the Gorba family and presented Caden with multiple pictures, and told him to look at the pictures, and tell him if the woman he had seen was in any picture. And Caden would pick 3 out of 4 photos. All 3 were Sandra Hughes photos. This sent the rescue team to the area that Caden had seen and spoken to Sandra, but they couldn't find her anywhere. They couldn't find her dead or alive. Up to date, no one has been able to explain what happened to Sandra Hughes, and what was behind her strange sightings. Her case was never closed. It remains open, waiting for a clue that will give more information and push it further. If you have any information regarding Sandra Hughes, please get in touch with Madera County Sheriff, or report to the nearest authorities.